Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so now we're talking about the obligations, the bare minimum of the prayer. Okay, so if you don't do these things, there's no prayer. If you do those things, you've prayed, right? It is by default the wrong thing to do to merely do these things. The only exception is when you have no time left, right? So you wake up and it's 4 minutes before sunrise. You run, you make wudu, cover your awrah. You have 2 minutes left or 1 minute left. You're obliged to keep to the minimum. Right? You cannot go, you can't recite, for example, recite a surah because you don't have any time left. You can't do subhanallah and ruku and sujood. You don't have any time left. You're praying dhuhr, you have to first skip the first tashahhud because you have to pray the 4 rak'ahs before the end of the time, right? So that's basically the only situation. Otherwise, this tells us what is the bare minimum, does not tell us what you should do. So number one, you intend. So you're actively aware of what you're doing and you say, right? So there's these three things that start the prayer. I know what I'm doing. I say Allahu Akbar, and where is it? And you're standing. He kind of put that before. He says you have to stand. But he should have put it here in reality because it's actually an integral, right? So there's these three things: intention, entering the prayer with takbir, and standing, right? So many people, classic mistake for kids and other people is that they're saying Allahu Akbar while bowing. You can't do that, right? There is some kind of leeway in the Maliki school in some scenarios, but it's a bit tricky. But otherwise, basically, if you don't stand still and say Allahu Akbar, then your prayer is not valid according to anybody, basically. So you have a problem. So it's really important. You go in, I know what I'm doing, Allahu Akbar, I'm standing upright, and then bow. If you catch the Imam in ruku', so be it. If you miss him, so be it. But the important thing is the prayer hasn't even begun yet until you stand up and stand still. I know what I'm doing. I'm praying Dhuhr, I'm praying Asr, whatever it is. Allahu Akbar, right? You need to do that. And you have to say Allahu Akbar. You can't say Allahu Akbar, right? So the place we used to pray Jum'ah in Hereford, Mizan, Bengalis, they used to say Allahu Akbar, right? So that wouldn't count, right? It's a ritual and it has to be said correctly. You could say Allahul Akbar, right? That's about it. You could say Allah is the greatest, right? You can add the word al, but that's about it. Like you have to say the word Allahu Akbar. There's nothing. You can't say Allahu Akbar. You can't say Allahu Akbar, etc. And just a side point, again, we were talking right now with Sheikh Mizan about expertise, right? So as a non-expert in the Hanafi school, I had heard that in the Hanafi school, there's some leeway with this, and that you can say anything, basically any kind of praise that starts the prayer. So I was praying Jum'ah once in a mosque, and about 300 people perhaps, and the Imam said Allahu Akbar like that. Okay, so I told myself, oh, it's okay. In the Hanafi school, as long as you praise Allah somehow, right? As long as you praise Allah somehow, it's fine. So I don't need to make a big deal. Alhamdulillah, there's a difference of agreement, etc., etc., etc. Anyhow, I ask one Hanafi scholar, two Hanafi scholars, three Hanafi scholars. They start showing me references. I start looking things up, and you realize that's a problem in the Hanafi school. Saying Allahu Akbar, in fact, even in the middle of the prayer is a problem because it means Allah is shaitan. One of Akbar is one of the names of shaitan. So it is actually important, right? If you didn't study the Shafi school, you said it's okay, the deen is fast. You didn't study the Hanafi school, you didn't study the Maliki school, didn't study the Hanbali school, and then eventually you prayed this prayer when somebody said Allahu Akbar, and you're like, oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal, right? So that Jummah was actually invalid, right? I had to repray it. I didn't make a scene, but I did tell the board. I said, look, that's a problem. Go ahead, Sheikh Mizan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that that would be problematic, as in that would invalidate the prayer. I found that in books, Akbar, and it's the reason that you said, but I haven't found this reason any like backed up with any basis. But nonetheless, most likely, if anybody does it, especially if it's a Bengali, he's not doing it intentionally. Obviously, it's accidentally. Um,
Yeah, so it's not kufr, of course it's not kufr, right?
yeah,
But what I'm saying is, so I remember like one scholar he said, when the Hanafis say you can start the prayer with any praise, it means any actual praise, like Subhanallah, not not something that is cut up. So Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. You are not actually saying anything now. That's not that you didn't you neither did A nor B. So the point is you could start the prayer with Allahu Akbar, with I don't know, Subhanallah, something like that, but not not nothing, right? So it is actually important. It is so the concept here is it is a ritual, right? It is a ritual. Giving charity is not a ritual, but praying is a ritual. Being nice to other people is not a ritual, but zakat is a ritual. So when you have a ritual, there's actually rules. Like you've got to stick to the actual way of doing it, right? So you have to say Allahu Akbar. You can't drop the hamza, the alif. Allah, you can't say that. Can't add a wow. Allahu, right? You can't put a wow before the hamza. Allahu Akbar. You can't extend the bar. You can't do that. You have to say Allahu Akbar, right? You can't drop the ra as you would in British English, right? The guy went to the bar, right? The bar. It's not, right? Or we parked the car, right? In British English, right? But you can't say that. So for someone like myself, be careful. Allahu Akbar, not bar, right? Allahu Akbar, right? You can't say that. You have to say Allahu Akbar. So I'm standing still, I'm upright, I know what I'm doing, and I say Allahu Akbar. Number three, the reading of the Fatiha beginning with the words Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And it says the 14 points of stress, tashdidat, and not pronouncing the a dha instead of a dad, right? So again, this is a ritual. You actually have to do the Fatiha properly. So I remember I was 16. I turned up in Jordan and I was in a kind of a community there. And the rule was you're not allowed to be in that community unless you have a certificate that your Fatiha is correct. You're not allowed to stay there. Like if you're going to stay here, you have to work on your Fatiha and make sure that it is correct and get a certificate, right? So you sit down, it doesn't have to be perfect, but for example, tashdidat, this is something that an Arab and non-Arab can work on. Like ayn and ghayn and stuff like that, it's kind of hard, right? But the tashdidat, that's not difficult, right? You can actually do this. It's very simple. It's like the syllable ends with a consonant and begins with a consonant, right? Mid, so it's not midin, it's middin. Yo middin, Middin, right? Middin, right? Things like that. So you actually have to sit down and actually make sure it's done properly. It takes some time for some people, but you have to make sure it's done properly. Same with the letters that are hard for non-Arabs, right? I remember I was 14, I think my brother sat me down, he said, Fareed, in Arabic there's a ha and a ha and a ha. And I was like, you just said the same thing three times. He says, no, there's a ha and a ha and a ha. And I was like, doesn't make any sense. Like my ear can't even hear the difference, but there's a ha and a ha and a ha, right? My ear could not even hear it, right? My ear could not even hear it, but you have to work on it. And then it's, oh, there's a ha and there's a ha and a ha, and they are not the same. And you don't say alhamdu, you say alhamdu, right? The sad, you can technically get away without the sad in Surah Al-Fatiha in some ways, but we'll leave that for now. But working on the sad, working on the dad, right? Lord is not easy, but you have to work on it. So it says here, not pronouncing a dha as a dad. So here the author is speaking to Arabs because most Arabs actually pronounce the dad as a dha, right? Most of them do that. And for this reason, many Shafi'is, even if it's not the reliable position, many Shafi'is have said it's overlooked, right? Because it's actually really difficult. Like doing the dad is so difficult for most Arabs that they say dha. They say dha. They don't say Allah. Right? They'll say maghdubi, maghdubi, right? So here, let's make a distinction between two things. One is I am actually physically incapable of pronouncing the dad. Like it doesn't matter what I do, I can't pronounce it. So that's drastically different. Like particularly for an Arab, I was brought up as an Arab. For many Arabs, they have serious, serious tajweed problems, right? I mean, imagine if we were sitting down with Chaucer today, right? You all know Henry Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer? No? Canterbury Tales?
No.
No. Anyway, this is English spoken 900 years ago. Okay? So the way he pronounces words is very different to us. He'd look at our English and be like, everything you say is off, right? So like our U's, right? Our U's, with the exception of Mizan, all our U's are off, right? We say but it's actually, how do you say it, Mizan?
But
Right? So everybody, Southern English, Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, that was all off, right? So it'd take a while. We have to sit down with our great grandfather, and he says it's not but, it's but. It's not right. It's not cut, it's cut, right? It's not thorough, it's thorough. It's not night, it's neat. Like what? Like so it would be kind of difficult. So for many Arabs it's like that. Like they've just ruined so many things, or they've changed so many things. It's actually really hard for them to change a lot of things. So you might find somebody like he's 80 and he say a lot and he's like the, and in his mind like it's just saying the same letter and it's there's no hope. It's pointless, right? So that's one thing is I have tried to do what Allah has told me to do, but I'm not physically capable of doing it. That person's prayer is valid. Okay. You may not be able to pray behind them if you can do it properly, but their prayer is valid, right? You, for the life of you, you cannot say ha. Just can't do it. Right? You just cannot say ha. Okay. Alhamdu. Khalas. Just say alhamdu. Right? That's as good as you can do. That's one category, meaning even if at gunpoint, there's nothing you could do, right? And what's the principle? لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah doesn't ask you to do things you can't do. Okay? It's like somebody who can't stand, right? The other one is you could, but you just didn't bother. Right? You didn't bother. Like Mustafa, what's that? The ta with the ta on top in Urdu, like roti. How do you pronounce it?
T,
Say it
roti.
again. Roti, roti. Is that right? Roti.
No, that's the other one. The
That's the ta. Roti. Ta ta
ta,
ta
ta,
ta ta
ta,
ta. Ta.
like the
Right?
table. Yeah,
Ta ta ta. Is that right?
yeah.
So interestingly, I used to tell people that I could not do it at all. I used to tell people like I can't do the T in roti, right? But I just did it, right? It was good enough. Mustafa, you give me maybe 75%. You give me a B minus.
No, that was a A.
It was an A,
Mistake.
Allahu Akbar. Right. I'll give you an A2. We can exchange grades. What's it called? The point is, a lot of people say they can't do something, but they just don't put any effort. Okay, so it's one thing is Allah's asking me to do something that I simply cannot do, versus it's just going to take me a bit of hard work to do this, right? And so many people they're like, I don't want to do this, or this is it takes too much time, or this is kind of like, I don't value doing this, right? Well, interestingly, Allah values you doing this, right? It is actually a ritual. There are particular sounds that you have to make in a language that you don't speak. And it's going to be hard, but you have to put in effort. And so most people, if you sit down with a tajweed teacher for some time, eventually you will manage to get a 75, 80% Fatiha. It won't be perfect. That's true. You are not going to be Sheikh Abdul Basit. That's fine. And depending what kind of teacher you have, you will never ever be perfect. Like it's impossible, basically, right? Tajweed is one of these things that are like super, super difficult, right? But getting 80%, meaning I am not making any glaring mistakes. Like I'm not changing letters, it's more of a dad than anything else, right? It's more of a ha than anything else, right? It's more of a ta than anything else. Fine, right? Like, so you do actually have to put in effort. So now here's the question. I was capable of putting in effort and I could have achieved it, but I didn't. What do we say that? We say that prayer is not valid. The prayer doesn't count. Right? So that's a problem, right? So that's like saying, for example, you're sitting down with your spouse, right? You've been married for 30 years, and every 10 years, you discuss, are we going to go ahead or not? Do we say yes or no, right? And after 30 years, you realized your spouse could have changed, but she didn't. And you could have changed, but you didn't. And you're like, man, like we wasted, it's your life. And like, you could have changed, right? But you just didn't want to, right? So that's the person who doesn't want to do the Fatiha, right? You could have put in time, you could have done it, but you just didn't want to, as opposed to, I honestly could not do it. It was impossible for me. Okay. Honestly impossible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, prayer is fine. Prayer will count, right? But if you don't put in the time, right, to do your tajweed and make sure that it's actually, correct, then, it's a problem, right? And that's why for our kids, it's a priority for our kids to make sure that their Fatiha is correct, right? They don't need to do a khatam. They don't need to memorize Juz Amma. They don't need to do this. They don't need to do that. So many kids, unfortunately, they do a khatam, right? But their tajweed is off. They do memorize Juz Amma, but the tajweed is off, right? So it's more important that they do the Fatiha and they've covered 1 or 2 or 3 books in fiqh. Much more important than they've done a khatam, because it's not obligatory to do a khatam. You never need to do a khatam in your whole life. It's fine. Never picked up the Mus'haf in your whole life. It's fine. It is a problem when you don't actually do the worship, you don't do your contracts, you don't do your marriages, you don't do your buying and selling. You don't know that you have sins inside you that are destroying you and other people. That's a huge problem, right? Okay, so anyway, try your best, right? Allahu a'lam. Okay, for there is no dha in the Fatiha, right? There is only a dad in the Fatiha. And then to bow, ruku', and it's necessary to lean forward so that one leans on and rests the hands upon the knees. So the hands don't need to rest on the knees, but you have to lean forward such that the palm could touch the knee. Okay? You lean forward such that the palm could touch the knee. That's the angle that you need to get to. Pausing therein, right? In every single physical integral, like standing, like bowing, you have to pause. If you don't pause, it doesn't count. If you go into ruku' and don't pause and come out again, what do? You go back in again. Because you didn't do it. Right? If you don't pause, it doesn't count. Returning to the standing up position. So you stand up again. And then you pause. It says, where pausing for a few moments is also necessary. It's not really a few moments. It's basically a second. Right? Come in, stop, and then go, right? So that's what it means is you actually stop. That's the point. As opposed to you don't stop, you just go up and then move, right? You can't do that. You have to go up, stop, and then go into sujood. Then you go into sujood, right? And sujood there's 7 parts of your body need to be on the ground. The skin of your forehead, So even if a woman's wearing niqab, the skin of your forehead has to be on the floor. There can't be any barrier. You can't have a niqab, you can't have your hood, your hat, your turban, your clothes, your khimar. You have to have the skin of the forehead has to be on the thing that's on the floor. Okay? Your hands, even if they're covered. Your knees, even if they're covered. And your toes, meaning you're going to bend your toes back like somebody would do who is sprinting, right? So your toes need to be bent back, right? At least one toe. Your one big toe, for example, can be bent back, right? But it has to be the what's going to be on the ground is the bottom of the toe, not the edge of the toe or the top of the toe, right? So you do have to be careful with that. Is there a debate on that in the Shafi'i school? 100% there's a debate, right? There's a strong position in our school is that as long as your head is on the floor, you're fine. Doesn't matter about your toes, doesn't matter about your hands, doesn't matter about your knees, right? If you could just balance on your forehead, that'd be enough, right? That's a strong position in the school, but the relied upon position in the school is 7 parts on the floor, the skin of your forehead, hands, knees, and then your toes with at least one toe bent back. Does that make sense, inshallah?
Yes.
Adam, Amina, Datu Amir, Nizam. Can everybody hear me? Adam, you there?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's that, and then this, and then and then so then you and then pausing between the two sujood, you go to sujood, you pause, you come out, you pause. So do you have to raise your hands? No. Do you have to say subhanallah? No. Do you have to say Allahu Akbar? No. Right? This is all it is. Literally, come into the prayer, you say Allahu Akbar. You only said Allahu Akbar once in the whole prayer. That's the only obligation. Right? Saying subhanallah, not obligatory. Subhana Rabbil Azim, reciting a surah, not obligatory, right? Just do the Fatiha, that's it. Saying Allahu Akbar, saying Ameen, it's not obligatory, right? Okay, so then it says, one must fulfill the above obligations in each rak'ah. The first tashahhud in Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha, and the sitting during this part of the salah is sunnah, and the second tashahhud is obligatory. So if you just did the final tashahhud, your prayer would count. And again, this will be obligatory if you have no time left. You have 1 minute left to pray Maghrib. It's not halal to do the first tashahhud. You have to skip the first tashahhud because you have to guarantee that the whole prayer is done in that time. The prayer upon the Prophet ﷺ, which comes after the tashahhud, but before the taslim, is fard, right? It's going to have the tashahhud in a second. So you say this is the minimum one, right? So this is basically they got the different tashahhuds from the Prophet ﷺ, and they found what was shared in all of them. So it's this plus this. That's the bare minimum. So at-tahiyyatu lillah, and there's other things that come after that. سلام عليكم أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته سلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Okay, that's the bare minimum tashahhud, the normal tashahhud that you might choose. There's different tashahhuds, the tashahhud of Ibn Abbas, the tashahhud of Abu Huraira, the tashahhud of Abdullah Mas'ud. There's other ones. They can do whatever you want. It's fine. They fill in basically more things around here and there, right? But that's the bare minimum. And then the minimum is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allah or Allahumma salli ala Rasul or Allahumma salli ala Nabi. So you can say Muhammad or the Prophet and Nabi or the Messenger al-Rasul, right? That's the bare minimum. So you've now done that. And then you say Assalamu alaikum. That's it. Prayer is over now. You don't have to turn right to the left. You don't have to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, right? You don't have to do a second one, just Assalamu alaikum. That's it. But again, the issue is with all spoken integrals, you have to be done correctly. So it's very common for these things to be off. At-tahiyatu. No, Habibi, it's not at-tahiyatu. Okay, what's wrong? It's a ha and not a ha. And there's a shadda. At-tahiyatu. At-tahiyatu. There's a shadda here and a shadda there. You actually have to get this right. So again, what is more important? Memorizing Juz Amma or memorizing the tashahhud properly so that you say it properly. Okay? So it's very important, right? In those people involved in Islamic schools, you ask your tajweed teacher, can my child do the tashahhud properly? And they say, oh, that's not part of the curriculum. Go and talk to the Dean of Islamic Studies. Why is it not part of curriculum? This is very important, right? In your school, right? Instead of going to another surah, why are we going to another surah when we don't know the tashahhud properly, right? So it's an issue. So at-tahiyyatu lillahi. Salam wa as-salam. Ayn alaykum ayyu shadda. Han shadda. Nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salamun alayna. So alayna. No, not alayna. Alayna. There's an alif here. Wa ala. There's an alif here. Ibadillah. His salihin. There's a sad here. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. There's a ha here, not rasuluh. Rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad or ala nabiyyi or ala rasuli. Assalamu alaikum. No, you have not prayed. Assalamu alaikum. Ayn. Right? So this is a ritual. It's not enough that you just had a good intention. It's not enough that you just tried. You do actually have to do this ritual properly, right? It is also required that one humbles oneself in total ikhlas, making it an actual, making it an action solely for the sake of Allah. So you're broken before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if you pray super fast, there's no problem in praying very quickly, right? I've seen people who are very nurani, people of light who pray extremely quickly, right? We have kids, we have work, we have schedules, we have trains to catch. When people are busy, it's not always possible to pray for a long time, and there's no requirement to do that, right? You can pray quickly, but with focus, right? It's possible, right? Hudur is being aware of what one is saying and doing. Submissiveness, khushu', is also required. Khushu' is the submission of the limbs, the concentration of the heart, and and pondering upon and understanding what is being read, right? So God accepts the salah according to the amount of hudur, right? So that is in terms of qabul, in terms of acceptance, if you are 10% focused, it's a 10% prayer, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might just write it for you as a complete prayer anyway. But in principle, you didn't, basically, if you weren't focused, you didn't pray. If you were focused 50%, you did a 50% prayer, right? And it is actually bad and rude not to be focused in prayer, right? Like I'm talking to somebody and I'm on my phone the whole time. Like it is actually rude, right? Sometimes my kids will be talking to me and I'm saying, Habibi, I'm actually on my phone. I actually have to do something. I don't want to have a half conversation with you, right? Can you just let me finish this so I can look you in the face and talk to you, right? So it is important, right? It's not a small thing at all. And you know, we need to, this is the kind of the bigger jihad, right? That we need to focus on. Excuse me. And then showing off in prayer and all other times is forbidden. Showing off meaning I'm only praying. I only started praying so that people can see me, or I changed the way I pray, right? For other people, right? So for example, I'm praying and normally I would just do a short surah. Then Mizan comes in. Mizan's religious. I'm religious. Religious people show off to religious people in religious matters. So instead of going to Surah Al-Ikhlas, I go into Surah Maryam, right? Mizan is a scholar, right? And so I know he will appreciate these things. So I start reciting Surah Susi instead, right? Riwayat Susi instead. And he's like, oh man, to impress people, right? So people show off to other people who are of the same ilk, who have the same nature, right? Like money, people with money show off to other people with money, right? Mizan's a businessman, and I turn up. I'm like, yeah, you know, I remember one person said this to me. He said, inshallah, he wasn't showing off, but it's the kind of language is showing off, right? Um, uh, who owns Apple? No, it wasn't Apple. No, it was Tesla. Who owns Tesla?
Elon Musk.
Yeah, it was like, dude, I've had enough. I've had enough of Elon Musk, right? So people would die to work for Tesla, right? People are like, oh my God, I really, really want to try and get a job and work for Tesla. And he was like, yeah, I've had enough of that guy, you know? So like he's kind of like talking in a way that's like, this is I'm number one, I'm financially in a position to choose, which most people are not, right? Number two, it's kind of like, yeah, there's bigger fish in this sea, basically. So this is kind of showing off in dunya. People show off in dunya, people show off in deen, right? May Allah protect us, right? So showing off in deen is particularly vile, right? It's particularly vile and disgusting, right? And it's a very, very real thing, right? Showing off in prayer and these kind of things is a very real thing, right? And it's very normal and natural and haram, right? And often it happens around the opposite sex as well, right? Often it happens around the opposite sex. It's very normal to do that, right? Because every single person is programmed to procreate, even if it's illogical, right? So it's not the logic that if my voice is nice, if I sound more focused, then I will be able to sleep with this person, have children. That's not how the brain works. It's not logic like that, right? People don't show off to other people or show off to the opposite sex for logical reasons. It's not logical. It's just you're programmed to get attention. So you have to be very, very careful. If you're praying, you're praying and as a man and women might hear you, these kind of things, you have to be very, very careful and very cognizant of the reality that is a normal inclination and you have to stop that. And for a woman, same thing, right? For a woman, exactly the same thing. It's a very normal, natural thing to do. Even if you're not even interested in that man or that, it's not like, oh yeah, so showing off it's just a very normal thing to do. And it's very haram. Go ahead, Mizan.
The Shafi student of knowledge that I was talking about, we go through Kitab al-Hikm, the Sharh of Kitab al-Hikm, Tanbih, as like a Sufi gathering every week, every Tuesday. And he was asked once how do you know if you have ikhlas? And he said that we just won't know until, it's too late. And the thing is with me is, when I'm teaching or something, it's very hard sometimes to have ikhlas. It's like sometimes it just comes about, you get chuffed. This,
Yeah.
so how would you get rid of that?
So so one thing is that's like just like getting like feeling big about something is one. One for me, like I remember when I first started teaching, my big brother, my Barabai, he said, be careful, Fareed, For me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protect me because I just make a lot of mistakes.
I
So
still
like I'm
make
teaching,
mistakes too, but it's like
you know,
it's difficult.
yeah. So for me, like, so I just make a lot of mistakes. I actually don't like I'm continually reminded that I don't know answers. You know what I'm saying? So having shuyukh that are like way better than you and just continue making mistakes, that's one thing. The other thing then is actually working on yourself, you know? So like, if you're not actually working on yourself, then you don't see your faults and you're not working, these things aren't happening. So there's one thing is to push it away. The other thing is it's like one thing is to walk away from the dunya. It's another thing to walk towards Allah. You know what I'm saying? So part of takhliya, part of getting rid of bad ways of being is tahliya, is painting yourself nicely. So it is actually important, like you actually have alone time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like I'll just give you an example, right? You sit down in a room by yourself, no phone, no book, and just close your eyes. Do you gravitate towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is that like the default, like, or does your mind go somewhere else? My mind goes somewhere else. Okay, you have a serious problem, right? You are like somebody, right? Like imagine this, for example, right? Imagine this, Romeo marries Juliet, and they actually can't even sit in a room together. They find it like awkward. Like they need somebody else. Like it has to have like they could be together if there were other people, but they can't really be together. They can't really have a conversation. It's kind of like awkward, right? That's a really messed up relationship. Like Romeo and Juliet, come on, guys. Like, why can't you be together? Why can't you just like want to be together? Like it's just like natural and like you love each other and like so most of us are like that. We are Romeos or Juliets. We have the greatest thing in existence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be with, but we find it socially awkward. Like that's what ghafla is. It's a social awkwardness. Like we almost try and it's like you have to pick up your phone. Like you're talking to someone, you have to pick up your phone. It's like you can't concentrate on them, right? And so these things, like I actually need to focus on khushu' and prayer. Like I actually have to work on it. Realize that it's there. Realize your pride. Realize you're actually selfish. Realize that you complain a lot. Realize that you actually have a lot of resentment for lots of things, right? And actually work on these things and work on talking to Allah, thanking Allah, these kind of things, right? Because ultimately it's love, right? So if you get actual Romeo and Juliet, or was it Farhad and Shireen, right? They're not going to have a problem with focusing, right? So you go and ask Farhad and say, how do you focus on Shireen? He says, how can I not focus on Shireen? So that's ibadah, right? Like you have love. Above love is adoration, and above adoration is worship. So if you have actual worship, right? It's like, of course, you're gonna, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. Those who believe, they are more intense in their love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So actually focusing on genuine love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala part of your life, it makes dhikr in general easier, and focus in prayer and also in ikhlas. Like I genuinely love Allah, so like I am trying to show off to him as opposed to anything else, right? But you do have to work on things, and you have to find out where your mistakes are. You have to find out, and you also have to be around people. I remember my own experience, like moving from going to Jordan. For me, that was like it was like somebody like opening the curtains. Like the curtains are closed, and oh man, you don't realize how insincere you are, right? You don't see these things, but then it's still hard, right? You still have to work on things, and you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful, and you have to know that it's by default there, right? It's by default there, right? And you have to be very careful. Okay, let's move on, inshallah. But ultimately, it's a whole process of self-change as opposed to a putting on a plaster to fix it today. It is actually a whole process, like rewiring your whole being. There was a sheikh, he asked his teacher, he said, sheikh, what do you do about thoughts that come to your mind while you're praying? So the sheikh was like, I don't understand. Said, when you're praying and things come into your head, he says, I don't understand. What do you mean? So sheikh, like when you're praying and you start thinking about the car and you start thinking about, it's like, I don't understand. So the sheikh did not have that. Like he didn't understand what that even meant. You know what I'm saying? And you're like, wow, he's really rewired himself, like that sheikh is like, that's just natural. Like dhikr is not active. Dhikr is passive. Ghafla is active. right? لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. She has, the soul has what she earns, and against her is what she goes away. ما اكتسبت, she goes away from her fitrah. And you do something weird, right? So ghafla, riya, all of these things, that's not natural. That's like messed up, right? You know, that's like a messed up thing. That's not a normal situation. So getting back to our fitrah, it takes a lot of work, but it becomes normal and natural in Jannah. People won't show off. People won't be proud. And they'll do that naturally, right? The people will make dhikr without any effort. They don't have to make themselves. They have to remind themselves. They just, because it's just natural. It is the natural the state. Okay, we have to go into this. Acts that invalidate the prayer. So deliberately speaking invalidates the prayer, if only if it's 2 letters, as does a large amount of forgetfulness. So a large amount of speech due to forgetfulness. That's what it means, right? So, I know I'm praying, I know I can't speak, but I knowingly and intentionally say, so that's a ha and a meme at least, if not 3 letters. So you intentionally go, oh my God, this imam is taking such a long time, right? You intentionally say, oh no, right? So your prayer is broken. As opposed to, I'm in the middle of the prayer, okay, and I can smell something burning in the oven. So you say, oh, oh, there's probably 2 letters, right? But you didn't say it on purpose. It just came out. Or don't. It just came out, right? Your kid is about to do something, it just comes out of the mouth. Don't, right? So, or you didn't know, right? You just became Muslim and someone's like, hey, what are you doing? Say, oh, I'm praying. And then 6 months later, you took a class like this and you're like, oh, really? You can't say I'm praying in prayer? And you're like, I didn't know that. So it was, so you said 2 letters, right? Or more intentionally, or you said a large amount, or you said a small amount, few words, right? Intentionally, or a large amount. For example, you said, hey, I'm praying. I actually became Muslim last week. So if you just don't mind, I just need to finish praying here. And they're like, oh, how long are you going to be praying for? Say, oh, about 5 minutes. Oh, and how long have you been praying for? You said, oh, I've been praying. I started praying last week. And oh, how do you do that? So, oh, you make wudu and you do this and you do this. So you had a whole conversation. Even if you didn't know that you can't do that, or even if you did it forgetfully, the prayer is broken, right? But if it's a small thing like, oh man, or I'm praying, or something like that, something small, and you didn't know you couldn't speak in prayer, or you forgot and it just came out, then the prayer is fine. Okay? A large amount of action also invalidates a prayer, right? You, I don't know, wrap your turban around your head, you move around a lot, start doing jumping jacks, whatever it is, right? The person, there's a row in front of you, so you step forward, taking 3 or 4 steps, for example. You can't do that. So you can't take 3 steps in a row, right? You have to take 1 step, 2 steps, stop, pause, and then another 2 steps. So a large amount of action also invalidates a prayer. For example, 3 substantive movements, right? 3 steps, for example, eating, drinking, right? And then it should say semicolon, exposing part of the aura without covering it immediately, right? So your hijab got pulled by your son, right? And your fringe was showing, cover it immediately. Your towel fell down, your thigh got exposed, cover it immediately. If you don't cover it immediately, the prayer is broken. The appearance of najasa is not removed immediately without holding it, right? So you have the najasa, you're praying in a dry area, very dusty area where there's cows and sheep and goats, and a bit of dung, dry dung blows onto your thobe, and then it just falls off. That's okay, right? It says if the worshipper does 2 essential actions behind the imam, So the Imam goes into ruku', you're still standing. He comes up, you're still standing. He starts leaning forward. Okay, and he's now no longer in a standing position. So he's done ruku' ahead of you, and the standing ahead of you, your prayer is going to be broken now. Right? You're standing up doing the qunut to Fajr. He goes into sujood. He comes out. He starts leaning forward such that he's no longer in the sitting position. Okay? As soon as he's no longer in the sitting position, he is now 2 integrals ahead of you. He's done a sujood and a sitting ahead of you. Your prayer is going to be broken, right? With the exception of somebody who has a back problem and you're very slow. You have your Fatiha, you forgot to do the Fatiha, right? So somebody who forgot to do the Fatiha, for example, and then they remembered, oh my God, I have to do the Fatiha behind the Imam. I better start now. You have a back problem. There was no space in Jumu'ah, right? Like there was literally no place to do sujood. So you couldn't even go into sujood. So you had to go to sujood after people. That's fine. If you have some excuse, then you can lag behind for a bit. That's fine. But otherwise, you can't lag behind, right? If you lag behind two complete integrals, your prayer will be broken. Likewise, if he fails to before or after, the same thing. So before the Imam, likewise, if he fails to follow the Imam without legitimate reason, then his prayer is invalidated. Same thing, right? You're two ahead of him or 2 behind, right? Without reason, for example, we mentioned you have a back problem, you're very slow, right? It takes you quite a while for you to get into sujood. It takes you time. For example, your Fatiha takes like 2 minutes, so, or something like that. Okay, and then Jumu'ah, the Friday prayer, everyone's following? Datu Amir, Sister Amina?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So the Friday prayer in congregation is fard ayn for every Muslim who is male, free, resident in the locale, and not excused by some legal exception such as sickness or rain, right? So women do not have to pray Jumu'ah. Slaves do not have to pray Jumu'ah. They don't exist anymore. But people who are not residents, meaning you're just passing through, you're not here for more than 4 days, right? So if you're there for 4 full days, you have to pray Jumu'ah, even if you're not a resident. But the point is you're here, but if you're just traveling through, you do not have to pray Jumu'ah, right? You can pray Jumu'ah, but you don't have to, right? So a woman could pray Jumu'ah, right? So she prayed 2 rakahs Jumu'ah instead of 4 rakahs Dhuhr, that's fine. She can, but she's not obliged to. Right? And not excuse for some legal reasons, you're sick, your wife's your whole family's sick, so you have to look after them. It's not safe. If you were to go to the prayer, it wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't be safe to leave people at home. Your dad's in ICU and he needs you to be there, right? It could be just emotional reasons, right? Right. So like in principle, everybody is safe, but for emotional reasons, it'd be really, really hard for them to do that, right? What else? Fear for your life, fear for your wealth. You were driving to Jumu'ah and then your neighbor called you, say, hey, someone just broke into your house, right? You can go back, for example, to sort the problem out. You just locked your cat in your room on your way to Jumu'ah and realize your cat's going to do something in your bed. So that's going to, that's like damaging properties and all that. Food's in the oven. A job, right? The scenario of work, work could actually be an excuse for Jumu'ah if you honestly have no other work, right? Like there's no other job you could ever do. Like if you left this job, you would not have another job. You don't have any savings. There's no other work you could do. You've been waiting for the last 3-4 years to get a job. This is the only job that is possible. And if you left it, there would be no work and you could not put food on the table, right? If that's the case, then yeah. But by default, that's not the case, right? For most people, that's not reality. But for many people, right? You can imagine people in Pakistan, Mustafa, right? I'm sure there's many people in working class Pakistan, and it's like, this is the job, right? This person goes 3 hours as a factory, and they're like, yep, it's 7 days a week. This is the pay, take it or leave it, right? And you're like, oh, Juma, they're like, pray in your own time. Is that correct? Do I have a correct picture of Pakistan?
Yeah, but some places like where there masjid or musalla everywhere, like, so is that as valid excuse still? Like if
No, what I'm saying is that basically it's like I'm just in certain places where they don't really have same workers' rights.
yeah.
Like your boss isn't very religious, and he's like, yeah, that's your problem. So like you couldn't go and complain to, I don't know, some organization. No one's going to do anything. You're a working class person. You do not have rights, and it's particularly Muslims. They were like, yeah, pray in your own time. Even if you asked to pray Dhuhr, they wouldn't let you do it. It's like, this is the job, and it's like literally there's no other work. Like there's no other work. SubhanAllah, one Pakistani brother, he said this. He said, like, why is it that my father and me and my kids will never be able to find work in Pakistan? Like it's a problem. Like this is very hard. Like, just I'm a normal working class person. I want to work 40-hour job and just put food on the table. It's very hard in many places in the world. And so in many places in the world, they don't have that luxury of, oh, you have to be inclusive. That's not even on the cards, particularly the kind of work that you're doing. It's just like, so, there's not even a situation to talk. It's not, you don't have a manager in that kind of way. It's just, you're a number, you log in and that's it. And if you don't do the work, you're not going to get food on the table. That's it. So that's extreme. For most people, it's not like that, right? For most people, it's not like that. Okay, it's necessary for the one delivering the two sermons to do so while in the state of tahara, so he's pure and his awra is covered. He must sit between the two sermons, and he should not pause longer than the normal pause. He should pause longer than the normal pause for salah. So he's going to sit down for what, 2 seconds. So we haven't. So we'll come to this inshallah next week. Inshallah. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.